All eyes were on her, but she didn't know it. Not at that moment. Her laughter echoed, cutting through the room like a blade, each laugh felt like a stab. The glass in hand, the fake smiles around, the disguised looks, everything was part of a ridiculous theater that I didn't know I was watching for months. But now, I was the protagonist. She laughed. And the sound of that laughter still echoes in my head as if every note screamed his name. I could see her, free, confident, secure, like someone who believes she has control over everything. She didn't know. She didn't know that control had already slipped through her fingers that morning, when I left the house with a broken heart and returned with a decision. I would no longer be the man who kept silent. "Are you sure about this?" a friend had asked hours before. "Do you really want to do this here, in front of everyone?" I wanted to. And the more I thought about it, the more I knew it wasn't about me. It was about justice. It was about making her feel at least a fraction of what I felt that night. Because no one understands what it's like to be betrayed until they see the person you love in the arms of another. Until I saw hidden messages, complicit looks, excuses that didn't make sense, and that perfume that wasn't mine. I had tried to ignore it, tried to believe it was all a misunderstanding. But when you see it with your own eyes, there's nowhere to run. She laughed. She laughed, and I saw the lie in her smile. I walked around the room and felt the weight of each step. I was about to turn the tables, but fear clawed at me inside. What if I was wrong? What if, for some reason, it was all a terrible mistake? But I knew it wasn't. I had the proof. I had the messages. I had seen it with my own eyes. They were together, and he was touching her like he owned something that should never have belonged to him. Anger burned me inside. But I controlled myself. I needed to control myself. "You look strange today," she had said a few hours ago. "Everything is fine." I smiled. And that smile was harder than anything I've ever done in my life. I wanted to scream at that moment, throw everything in her face, but I waited. I waited until the right moment. Because she deserved to feel the ground open beneath her feet. She deserved to be taken by surprise like I was. She deserved to know that I knew. The toast began. She got up. Her eyes sparkled as if she were having the best moment of her life. She looked at him. Yes, for him. And in that instant I knew. She had already erased me from her life, but what she didn't know was that I had already done the same. The difference is that I was going to let her know this in front of everyone. I raised the glass. My heart was beating so hard I could hear the sound of it mixing with the voices in the room. But I kept calm. All faces turned to me. She smiled. And I almost fell apart. For a second, I remembered the day we met, the way she looked at me back then, as if I were the only man in the world. But that moment died quickly. I saw her turn her face, seeking his gaze, and that's when I started. "Today is a special day," I said, and the voice was firmer than I expected. "Not only because we celebrate another year of achievements, but because we also celebrate new phases, new changes." She smiled again. I continued. "And today, I would like to share something with you." Everyone was silent. I could feel the tension building. I made an important decision in my life. Something I should have done a long time ago. I finally decided to free myself. She laughed. She laughed because she thought I was joking. I looked into her eyes, and at that moment, the smile disappeared. I continued. "I have decided that I will no longer live trapped in lies. I have decided that I will no longer live trapped in a farce." She blinked. Her face turned red. She looked around for support, but no one knew what was happening. I took a deep breath. I filed for divorce. The room fell silent. The glass slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. She tried to say something, but her voice didn't come out. I didn't stop. And more than that, I've already guaranteed that custody of the children will stay with me. Because I'm the only one here who still cares about them. She took a step forward. You can't do this, she whispered, but I could see the panic in her eyes. I could see her world falling apart in real time. Not here. Not like this. But I can, I replied. Because I already did. The murmurs began. People whispered. I could hear words like treason, scandal, shame. She looked at me as if I were a stranger, as if she couldn't believe that I had actually done that. But I did. And in that moment, I felt a kind of relief. But what I didn't expect was what came next. What I didn't know was that this would be just the beginning. Because when you mess with secrets, they tend to multiply. And that night, I discovered something that made everything I thought I knew become irrelevant. Because sometimes, betrayal isn't the worst thing someone can do to you. I looked at her, and she was crying. She cried as if her world had ended. But the problem is that this was not repentance. It was fear. Fear of something I didn't yet know. And it was at that moment that I realized. I still didn't know everything. Welcome to the channel where the truth behind betrayal is revealed in a raw and impactful way. Here, we do not support no kind of betrayal, on the contrary, our fictional stories show how disloyalty can destroy lives, relationships and dreams. Each narrative is a powerful reminder of the devastating consequences of infidelity. Get ready to dive into a story shocking and exciting. Take a deep breath, because what you're about to hear will mess with you. Happy listening. Ethan looked at his reflection in the mirror with a slight smile on his face. The dark suit, perfectly tailored, and the silver watch on his wrist reinforced the successful image he had built over the years. At 38, he was a respected man with a solid career as a financial manager at a large company. His determined look and confident posture have always made him an admired figure, both in the workplace and among his friends. But that night, there was something different about his expression. A discreet uneasiness that not even he knew how to explain. Maybe it was just the accumulated fatigue from weeks of endless meetings and tight deadlines. Maybe it was just the weight of keeping up appearances at that party his wife, Laura, had insisted so much on them attending. Laura was in the next room, finishing the last touches to her makeup. At 35 years old, she was the type of woman who attracted attention without having to try. Tall, slender and elegant, she had a natural charm that perfectly matched the tight red dress she wore that night. She knew how to stand out, how to use looks to her advantage. It was something that had always fascinated Ethan, since their first meeting. He remembered well that night, years ago, when she appeared at a bar with a group of friends and smiled at him as if she already knew exactly the effect she would have. Since then, Ethan has never been able to take his eyes off her. But as perfect as Laura seemed on the outside, inside she was complex. Laura liked control. She was detail-oriented, organized and obsessed with planning. I would like to know every step, to have answers to all the questions. And, above all, she liked to be admired. Ethan, on the other hand, has always been simpler. He liked to solve problems, but he also knew how to enjoy moments of calm. Where Laura saw opportunities to impress, he saw opportunities to relax. And perhaps it was this difference that, over time, began to create small cracks between the two. Nothing blatant, nothing that seemed out of the ordinary. But there was something in the air. Something Ethan felt without being able to name. That night, as she adjusted her hair and checked the shine on her lips, he found himself watching her in silence. Laura noticed and smiled. She asked him if he was ready for the party, and he nodded. But inside, Ethan wondered if Laura was really happy. They had everything any couple could want, a comfortable home, 2 adorable children, and financial stability. But lately, it seemed like there was a space between them that no amount of talking could fill. And he wondered if it was just in his head or if Laura felt the same way too. The drive to the party location was peaceful but silent. Ethan drove while Laura fiddled with her cell phone, answering messages and checking notifications. He tried to start a conversation a few times, but her responses were short, almost automatic. She seemed distracted, which wasn't unusual, but that night it bothered her more than usual. When they arrived, Laura immediately found colleagues and began to chat animatedly, as if the weight she seemed to carry in the car had disappeared. Ethan, on the other hand, needed a moment to adjust to his surroundings. The party was luxurious, as always. The hall was impeccably decorated, with golden lights and flower arrangements in every corner. The bar was packed, and waiters were circulating with trays of champagne and sophisticated snacks. Laura moved around the space as if she owned the place, greeting people, laughing and giving charming looks. Ethan knew this was her comfort zone. She loved being the center of attention, loved the hidden compliments and the admiring looks. And he respected that. Always respected. But that night, there was something about her smiles that seemed exaggerated. He approached the bar and ordered a drink, trying to ignore the uncomfortable feeling growing inside him. As he watched Laura chatting animatedly with a group of colleagues, he found himself analyzing every gesture, every subtle touch on someone's arm, every laugh that was a little louder than necessary. Maybe he was paranoid. Maybe it was just the stress getting louder. But for some reason, he felt like he was seeing his wife in a new light. And I couldn't say if I liked what I was seeing. As the night progressed, Ethan began to relax. He drank more than usual, chatted with some colleagues and even laughed at jokes that, in another situation, he wouldn't have found so funny. But even as he tried to distract himself, his eyes kept returning to Laura. She was dancing with a group of friends now, her body moving to the beat of the music as if there was nothing else in the world. And for a moment, Ethan felt jealous. Envious of her lightness, of the ease with which she seemed to leave everything behind and just enjoy the moment. But then something changed. Maybe it was a quick glance, an exchange of smiles or a discreet touch. Ethan couldn't say. But suddenly, the feeling of restlessness returned with a vengeance. He watched as Laura walked away from the group and disappeared among the guests. He waited a few minutes, but she didn't come back. And then he started looking for her. He passed the bar, the main hall, and nothing. When he finally found her, she was in the hallway that led to the bathrooms, talking to someone. A man. Ethan couldn't see his face right away, but he saw the way Laura touched her hair, how she slightly leaned her body closer to him. He saw her smile. That smile she always used when she wanted something. When she realized she was being watched, she quickly walked away, laughing as if it was just a casual conversation. Ethan didn't say anything. He just looked into her eyes for a moment before walking back into the room. He tried to push away the thoughts. He tried to convince himself that it meant nothing. But that night would be marked. Not for the party, not for the colleagues or the trivial conversations. It would be marked because, for the first time, Ethan felt that he no longer knew the woman with whom he had shared so many years of his life. And that was something he didn't know how to fix. Ethan moved in bed, staring at the ceiling illuminated by the dim light coming through the window. The room was silent, but his mind was screaming. Laura slept next to him, breathing softly, as if the world was in perfect harmony. He turned his face to observe her, analyzing every detail. The messy hair on the pillow, the flawless skin, the parted lips. Everything about her seemed so familiar and, at the same time, so distant. Since the party, that feeling of something wrong hadn't left him. The exaggerated smiles, the inexplicable absences, the looks exchanged. Everything seemed to fit together in a way that he didn't want to admit. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to push away the thoughts, but the image of Laura talking to that man in the hallway came back strongly. The next day, Ethan left early. He needed time to organize his thoughts. At work, he could barely concentrate. Endless meetings, spreadsheets and reports seemed insignificant compared to the emotional turmoil that consumed him. He checked his phone countless times, waiting for a message from her, an explanation perhaps. But nothing. When he finally decided to send a simple, "Is everything okay?" it took him almost an hour to get a short, cold response. She was busy. That word echoed in his head like a warning. In recent months, Laura always seemed busy. Appointments, meetings with friends. But there was something different. The way she avoided certain topics, how she seemed nervous whenever he approached without warning. Nights at home became quieter. Laura spoke little, and when she did, it sounded rehearsed. Ethan watched her every move, every quick exchange of messages, every smile that escaped her when she thought he wasn't looking. The distance between the two seemed to grow every day, and the doubt grew along with it. He started to notice the small details. Perfumes he didn't recognize, new clothes he never saw worn around the house, calls answered in hushed tones and ended quickly. He tried to convince himself that it was just paranoia, that he was seeing things where there was nothing. But deep down, he knew. One day, when he returned home early, he found her car in the garage. The heart accelerated. He didn't expect to see her home at that hour. He entered in silence, expecting to find her on the couch or in the kitchen, but the house seemed empty. He climbed the stairs slowly, each step echoing on the wooden floor. When he arrived at the room, the door was ajar. He pushed slowly and stopped. The bed was unmade, something unusual for Laura, who always kept everything impeccable. On the dresser, there was a half-empty glass of wine. He felt his stomach drop. The bathroom was closed, and he heard a faint noise, like running water. Before he could think, the door opened. Laura appeared in a bathrobe, her hair damp. She froze when she saw him. There was a moment of absolute silence, where eyes met and, for a second, Ethan wanted to believe he was wrong. But then she looked away. He saw the panic in her eyes. She tried to smile, but it was too late. The smell of men's perfume filled the air, a smell he had never smelled before. Ethan didn't say anything. He just turned and left the room, quickly going down the stairs. Laura ran after him, calling his name, but her voice sounded distant. He opened the front door and walked out, feeling the cold air hit his face. His chest burned, and each step felt heavier. He stopped on the sidewalk, trying to catch his breath. Laura appeared in the doorway, barefoot, holding her robe against her body. She started to speak, but he raised his hand, asking her to stop. "I didn't want to hear it. Not at that moment." He got into the car and drove aimlessly, trying to shake off the images that invaded his mind. In the following days, Laura tried to explain herself. "I said he was exaggerating, that there was nothing but misunderstanding." But each explanation seemed to make things worse. Ethan began to observe even more, looking for answers in the smallest details. Until one day, without warning, he came back early again. This time, there were no wine glasses or clothes lying around. But there was an eerie silence in the house. He went up the stairs, feeling his heart racing, and when he opened the bedroom door, he saw it. Laura was there. And she wasn't alone. Time seemed to stop. Ethan stood in the doorway, unable to process what he was seeing. Laura, lying in bed, next to another man. The world spun. He felt his blood running faster, his ears ringing. They quickly separated, covering themselves, but it was too late. Laura's face was pale, her eyes wide. The man next to her tried to say something, but Ethan didn't hear. He turned and left the room, walking down the stairs with heavy steps. Laura ran after him, screaming his name, begging him to listen. But Ethan didn't stop. He left the house and drove aimlessly, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. The images repeated in his mind like an endless nightmare. He tried to remember when everything had started to fall apart, but he couldn't find an exact point. It was as if something had slowly broken apart, piece by piece, until there was nothing left. He spent hours outside, parked in a secluded spot, trying to calm his mind. But the pain was unbearable. When he finally returned home, he found Laura sitting in the living room, her eyes red from crying. She started to speak as soon as she saw him, but he raised his hand again, asking for silence. He went up the stairs and started to pack a suitcase. Laura appeared at the door, begging him to stay, so they could talk. But Ethan didn't respond. He walked down the stairs with his suitcase in hand, walked past Laura without looking back, and walked out the door. But as he drove through the night, one question kept bouncing around in his mind. Why did Laura look so desperate? It wasn't just regret. It was something more. Something he didn't know yet. The silence in the room felt heavier than ever. Ethan was standing motionless, while Laura remained sitting on the couch, her eyes fixed on the floor. She held a glass of water with shaking hands, and tears had already left trails on her face. The clock on the wall kept time with an irritating tick, as if mocking the void between the two. Ethan finally broke the silence, his voice low but filled with something he could barely control. Do you think I'm stupid? The question came slowly but sharply, and Laura looked up quickly, her eyes wide as if she had been slapped. No. She shook her head and tried to speak, but her voice broke. I don't know how. Ethan stepped forward, cutting her off. Don't know how what? How did you betray me? How did you destroy everything we built? How did you lie to my face all these months? He moved closer, and Laura shrugged as if protecting herself. Do you think this is just about cheating, Laura? He took a deep breath, fighting his anger. Because it isn't. This is about how much you made me believe everything was fine, while you laughed at me behind my back. Laura placed the glass on the table, her hands shaking so much that she almost dropped it. Please let me explain. Ethan laughed, but it was a cold, hollow laugh. Explain what? I've seen everything I needed to see. I already know everything I needed to know. She stood up suddenly, her voice gaining strength in desperation. You don't know. You don't know everything. There are things I didn't tell you because I was scared. Ethan crossed his arms, his gaze fixed on her. Fear. Afraid of what? That I would find out that you are a liar. That I would find out that you were sleeping with another man in our bed. She shook her head quickly, the tears falling again. It's not that. You don't understand. There's more. Much more. I tried to protect you. Ethan took a step back, as if her words had hit him physically. Protect? Protect from what, Laura? I've seen enough. There's nothing more you can say to make this worse. Laura put her hands to her face and began to cry. Ethan stood still, his fists clenched, fighting the urge to leave, but something in her tone made him stop. Then she looked at him, her eyes red and swollen but filled with something he couldn't decipher. The man. She started, but had to stop to take a deep breath. The man you saw me with, he's not who you think he is. Ethan gave a short, almost sarcastic laugh. Of course it isn't. He's just a friend, right? Just someone who was here to make me look like an idiot. But Laura shook her head. He's someone I should have told you about before. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. The way Laura said it, the hesitation in the words, made something inside him scream. Who is he, Laura? Speak soon. She hesitated for a few more seconds before finally saying. He's my ex. The confession hit like a punch. Ethan was silent, taking it all in as his mind reeled. Ex? Are you telling me you brought an ex into our house? Into our bed? Laura nodded, her voice coming out as a whisper. It wasn't like that. It didn't start like that. I swear. I found it by chance. He was going through a difficult time and... Ethan raised his hand to stop her. I don't want to hear excuses. I want to know the truth. All. Now. Laura took a deep breath and started speaking quickly, as if she needed to get it out of her head once and for all. I was feeling alone, Ethan. You were always at work, always busy, and I started to feel invisible. So when I found him, it was like someone had seen me again. Someone who understood me. But I never planned for it to go too far. But things got out of control. It started appearing more and more often, and I couldn't stop. Ethan felt his stomach turn. So you decided to throw away everything we had because of this? Because of a guy you shouldn't have even let into your life again? Laura looked at him, her eyes pleading. I know I made a mistake. I know. But there's more, Ethan. He shook his head, exasperated. More? What else can you say that will change anything? Laura hesitated, and this time, when she spoke, her voice barely came out. He threatened me. Ethan frowned. What? What do you mean, you threatened? She looked at the floor, the words coming out choppy. He found out things about me. Things from the past. Things I hid even from you. And he said that if I didn't continue with him, he would tell everything. I was scared, Ethan. Fear of losing everything. Fear of losing you. Ethan felt his heart speed up. And what kinds of things did he discover, Laura? She hesitated for a moment, but then looked straight into his eyes. I took money. Money from your account. I transferred it to myself. At first, it was to cover some debts, but then I didn't know how to stop. Ethan was silent, processing this. So the betrayal wasn't enough. Did you steal from me too? Laura started crying again, but he didn't move. He felt the anger rise again, but with it came something else. Fear. Because now, everything made sense. Her nervousness. The excuses. The absences. She wasn't just cheating. She was hiding something much bigger. And it was at that moment that Ethan realized that this was not the end yet. It was just the beginning. Because if Laura was willing to go this far to hide her secrets, he knew there was more. And he was determined to find out. Ethan was silent, staring at Laura as if he were seeing her for the first time. She cried, but he could no longer feel sorry. Not after everything he had heard. Every word that came out of her mouth felt like a blow, but as much as it hurt, he knew he needed to hear the rest. I needed to understand where this was going. Laura wiped her tears with the back of her hands, trying to regain control, but her breathing was still ragged. He crossed his arms, keeping his posture firm, even though his stomach was turning. Continue. I want to know what else you're hiding. She looked up, hesitating for a moment, but knew there was no turning back. I didn't just steal from you. The confession came out as a whisper, but it hit Ethan hard. He took a step back, as if he needed space to absorb this. What do you mean, not just from me? She swallowed hard, fighting to keep her voice steady. From the company. Ethan felt his blood run cold. What? Laura lowered her head, unable to look at him. I messed with the accounts. Small amounts at the beginning. Nobody noticed. And then, when the debt increased, I continued. I needed to cover the holes. And when he found out, she stopped, her voice breaking again. He demanded a share. He said that if I didn't give him what he wanted, he would tell everything to you, the company, the police. Ethan put his head in his hands, feeling the world spin. Are you telling me you put everything on the line? Everything we built? Because of him? She nodded, the tears returning. I was desperate. I didn't know what to do. And every time I tried to leave, he pulled back. He threatened to tell us about the money, about us. He said he had proof. I felt trapped, Ethan. I didn't know how to get out of it. Ethan let out a bitter laugh. Stuck. Did you feel trapped? And me? I'm here, listening to all of this, not knowing if I can trust a word that comes out of your mouth. I am the man who worked to give everything to you, to our children, and you destroyed that. For him. Laura moved closer, placing her hands on his chest, but Ethan backed away. Please listen to me. I tried to stop. I swear. But he didn't leave me. I was afraid that you would hate me, that I would lose everything. I did everything wrong, but I just wanted to protect what we had. Ethan shook his head in disbelief. Protect? You called it protection. Laura fell to her knees, sobbing, but he could no longer be moved. He felt angry, at Laura, at the man, at himself for having trusted so much. He turned around, grabbed his keys and left. The cold night air hit him in the face, but it didn't help clear his mind. He drove aimlessly, trying to put the pieces together. The image of Laura kneeling on the floor kept coming back to him, but he pushed it away. I couldn't let the guilt take over. Not after what she did. When he finally stopped, he was in front of the office building. He entered through the side door, using his badge, and went up the stairs to his room. He sat in the chair, looking at the computer screen as if waiting for the answers to appear there. He opened the company's financial files, scrolling through numbers and transactions until he found what he was looking for. Strange movements, small enough to go unnoticed, but frequent enough to add up to a significant amount. Each transaction carried Laura's name. Ethan felt a tightness in his chest. He wanted to scream, break everything, but he knew that wouldn't solve anything. I needed to act. The next day, he went to a lawyer's office. He explained the situation, omitting the more personal details, and asked for advice on how to protect custody of the children and family assets. The lawyer was direct. With the evidence he had, the case was strong, but the company issue complicated everything. Ethan knew he needed to be careful. He didn't want to destroy everything, but he also couldn't let Laura get away with it. When he returned home that night, Laura was waiting for him. Her eyes were swollen, and her pale face showed that she had been crying all day. He closed the door behind him and stood there for a moment, waiting for her to say something, but it was he who spoke first. I went to the lawyer. Laura flinched, as if expecting a blow. Ethan continued. I don't know what will happen from now on, but I do know one thing. That's over. You and I. He finished. She started to cry again, but he stopped her. There's no point in crying now. You did it. You chose this. Laura fell onto the sofa, her face buried in her hands. I still love you. That never changed. Ethan felt a lump in his throat, but ignored it. Loving was never enough, Laura. Not when there is no trust. He spent the night in the guest room, listening to her sobs coming from the hallway. But as much as it hurt, he knew there was no going back. And for the first time in a long time, he felt a weight lifted from his shoulders. He still had a long way to go, but he was ready to move forward, with or without Laura. The next day, Laura was no longer at home when he woke up. She left a letter on the table, apologizing and saying she needed time to process everything. Ethan didn't know if that was true or just another excuse, but he didn't care anymore. He put the letter in a drawer, picked up his phone and began planning his next steps. But even as he organized his new life, he couldn't shake the feeling that the story wasn't over yet. There was something about Laura, the way she begged, that made him uneasy. As if there was still something he didn't know. And that was what scared him the most. Ethan sat on the edge of the guest room bed, feeling the weight of the early morning on his shoulders. The silence in the house seemed thicker than ever, as if it carried the echo of Laura's last words. He could still hear her voice in his head, begging to be heard, trying to justify the unjustifiable. But all he could feel was emptiness. There was no more anger, no more shock. Just a cold, almost paralyzing emptiness. He looked at his cell phone on the nightstand, but there were no messages. No attempt from her to get in touch since she left that morning. This should have brought some relief, but the silence only increased the feeling of abandonment. He stood up, walking to the window, looking at the empty street, lit only by dim streetlights. Outside, the world went on as normal, but inside that house everything seemed suspended, as if time had stopped since the night the truth came out. He wondered if Laura was truly sorry or just desperate to save her own skin. Her tears, the tremors in her hands, the pleas, all of it could have been real, but after so many lies, how could he know? Ethan closed his eyes, trying to push away the memories, but the images came back strong. He remembered every detail, how vulnerable and calculating she seemed at the same time. He thought about the man she brought into their lives, the betrayal he witnessed with his own eyes, but what bothered him most was the manipulation. She not only broke trust, she also robbed him of the security he always thought existed between them. And now he was here, alone, trying to pick up the pieces of what was left. The following days were long and exhausting. Ethan went back to work, trying to focus, but every email, every call seemed banal in light of the emotional chaos he was facing. He spent hours reviewing company documents, looking for ways to repair the damage caused by Laura's actions. She called lawyers, met with accountants and did her best to keep the situation under control, but no matter how hard she tried to focus on the numbers, her thoughts kept coming back to her. He wondered where Laura was, if she had run away or if she was just waiting for the right moment to reappear. And even though he tried to deny it, part of him still wanted answers. When he finally received a message from her, he felt his heart race. It was short, asking to meet him in a remote cafe, away from familiar eyes. He hesitated, thinking about ignoring it, but he knew he couldn't continue without understanding what else she had to say. The next day, he went to the agreed location, arriving early to observe the environment. Laura appeared a few minutes later, visibly haggard, with deep circles under her eyes and a tired expression. She sat down at the table carefully, as if afraid of any wrong move. "I just want to talk, please." Ethan remained silent, watching her as she wrung her hands nervously. She took a deep breath before continuing. "I'm not here to ask you to forgive me. I know this is impossible. I just need you to listen to me, because there are things you don't know yet." He crossed his arms, keeping his posture firm. "You've already lied so much, Laura. Why should I believe anything you say now?" She lowered her eyes, but then raised them again, staring at him with an intensity he hadn't expected. "Because I have nothing left to lose." Laura began to talk about how the relationship with the man she brought home had started as an innocent reunion. She said that at first, he seemed willing to help her with her financial problems, but it quickly turned into something darker. She explained that he began threatening her, not only with the money she embezzled, but also with personal information that could destroy her reputation. Ethan listened silently, feeling the anger return as her words flowed. He knew there was more, that Laura was still holding on to parts of the story, but he didn't interrupt her. When she finished, she remained silent, waiting for his reaction. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the dilemma before him. Part of him wanted to let her deal with the consequences of her own choices alone. But another part, a part he hated to admit, still cared. Not because he still loved her, but because she was the mother of their children, and he couldn't just turn his back. "Do you understand what you did?" he finally asked, and Laura nodded slowly. "I destroyed everything." Ethan shook his head. "It's not just about what you destroyed. It's about what you put at risk. Our family, the company, the life we built together. And now you want me to believe that you're sorry?" She looked at him, her eyes full of tears. "I am. I know nothing I say will fix this, but I would do anything to undo what I did." Silence took over the table again, but this time it was interrupted by a notification on her cell phone. Laura looked at the screen and turned pale. Ethan saw the panic on her face and grabbed the phone before she could hide it. The name on the message made her stomach sink. It was him. The man who had turned their world upside down. Ethan read the words quickly, feeling his anger rising. He was demanding more money, threatening to expose Laura to the police and their children. Ethan stood up suddenly, making his chair scrape on the floor. "We're going to end this." Laura looked at him, scared. "What? As?" He looked at her, his voice firm. "I will resolve this. But not for you. For the children. And because I won't let this man continue to control what's left of my life." Laura nodded, wiping away her tears as Ethan left the cafe. He didn't look back. "I was determined. No matter what he needed to do, he would put an end to the situation." And for the first time in a long time, he felt like he had control back. He knew the battle was far from over, but he also knew he was ready to face it. Doubt still hovered over what Laura would do from now on, but one thing was clear: Ethan would not allow the past to define his future. Ethan left the cafe with firm steps, but his heart was racing. He knew he was about to cross a line from which he could not come back, but there was no longer room for hesitation. The name in the message still burned on Laura's cell phone screen, as if it were a cruel reminder of everything he had lost. At that moment, Ethan no longer thought about her. "I didn't think about the love they had shared or the happy moments. All of this seemed distant, like a memory from another life. Now, all that mattered was putting an end to that cycle of lies, threats, and destruction." He drove through empty streets, his mind spinning with possibilities and plans. Arriving home, he sat in his office, surrounded by folders and documents that had been part of the process to discover the truth. The evidence was there: bank transactions, messages, call records. He had everything he needed to get the police involved, but he knew it would also completely destroy Laura. And, as much as part of him wanted to see her pay for everything she had done, another part still clung to the need to protect her children, to keep the image of the mother they knew intact. Ethan knew he couldn't act out of anger alone. It needed to be strategic. When Laura called that night, he answered without saying a word. On the other end, her voice was shaky, almost unrecognizable. "He wants more money. He said he will expose me to my parents, to our children. He said he's going to finish me, Ethan. I don't know what to do." He closed his eyes, holding the phone tightly. "You need to face it. You need to stop running." Laura started to cry, but he didn't give in. "You need to decide whether you are going to continue living in fear or face what you have done." "Because I've already decided." She fell silent, as if she finally realized that Ethan was no longer there to save her. The next day, Ethan found the man. He went to the address he had discovered during his investigations and waited. When he appeared, Ethan approached him without hesitation, looking him straight in the eyes. The conversation was short. The man smiled at first, as if he was confident he had control of the situation, but Ethan was clear. "I have everything. Evidence, records, witnesses. If you take one more step, I'll finish you off. And I'm not just talking about the police. I'm talking about everyone. I will expose every detail. I will make sure you can no longer walk down the street without being recognized." The man's smile disappeared. He tried to react, tried to intimidate, but Ethan didn't back down. This time, he was prepared to go all the way. Laura received the news later, and her reaction was a mix of relief and guilt. She thanked him, but Ethan didn't respond. There was no more room for reconciliation. He knew that what he had done was not for her, but for his children and for his own peace. However, he also knew that this did not mean the end of the problem. Laura would still have to deal with the consequences of her own choices, and he would not be part of that process. In the following months, Laura faced the fall. She was fired from the company after Ethan decided to expose internal fraud. He ensured that the damage was minimized to avoid a greater collapse, but Laura did not escape the consequences. He lost his job, his reputation, and a large part of the social circle he had built over the years. With no options, he moved to a small apartment, far from the neighborhood where they lived. The children spent most of their time with Ethan, who won primary custody after an exhausting but necessary process. Laura struggled to maintain contact with them, trying to rebuild the relationship destroyed by betrayal and lies. But the visits were tense, and the children took a while to forgive her. Ethan, on the other hand, found the strength to move forward. He refocused on his career, but also began to make room for things he had left aside. He went back to running in the mornings, reading on the weekends, and eventually started going out with friends. It was during one of these outings that he met Rachel, a woman with an easy smile and sincere eyes. She was different from Laura in almost every way, but at the same time, she seemed to fill the empty spaces that were left. It wasn't easy at first, especially because Ethan still carried the remnants of pain and mistrust, but Rachel was patient. She listened when he needed to vent and gave him space when he needed to be silent. Little by little, she brought lightness to his life, something he didn't even know he needed. Laura, on the other hand, sank into regret. She tried to start over, but shame and guilt followed her wherever she went. The man who destroyed her life disappeared after Ethan confronted him, leaving her alone to deal with the consequences. She thought about seeking help, but pride stopped her. She kept trying to get back on her feet, but each attempt seemed to take her back to where she started. Time passed, and the children began to adapt to the new reality. Ethan made sure to protect them, ensuring they had the emotional support they needed to deal with the breakup. But Laura knew that her relationship with them would never be the same. She continued to see them, but each encounter was a reminder of what she had lost. Ethan moved on. The divorce process was finalized, and he focused on building a new life. He learned to trust again, but without ever forgetting the lessons that experience had left. He knew the pain of betrayal wouldn't go away completely, but he also knew he wouldn't let it define him. Rachel was by his side every step of the way, showing that true love is not built on illusions, but on respect and loyalty. Laura remained stuck in the past. No matter how hard he tried, he could never free himself from the weight of the choices he made. And although she tried to justify her mistakes to herself, deep down she knew she had destroyed the only thing that really mattered. She saw Ethan move forward and realized he found what she never knew how to value: peace. This story is a reminder of how betrayal can leave deep marks, not only on those who are betrayed, but also on those who betray. It's proof that choices have consequences and that, no matter how painful it may be, the truth always comes out. If you liked this story, leave your comment and share your opinion. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Remember, this channel does not support cheating of any kind. Here, we show you the consequences so you can reflect on your own choices. Thank you for accompanying us to the end of this intense and exciting journey.